still here, I see. You most certainly have my sympathies. Well, it doesn't take a top-notch Miskatonic University graduate to realize that those Club Congo tourist types were in seriously deep doo-doo once they knowingly sought refuge inside the forbidden lair of those ginormous bloodthirsty bats. Furthermore, a bad situation turned into something considerably worse, as they inevitably came to hear the intensifying sounds of those dreaded Bongos of Horror. I wouldn't necessarily sanction that as a fitting characterization for the cultural or percussive nature of tribal drums. Bongos by any other name. Bongos of Horror, I tell you. Bongos, sounding their furious rage, their unstoppable fevered wrath, from the fiery pit, from the very heart of hell itself. Geez, get a load of him, will you? Just wait until I someday unleash the Fay Ray classic Black Moon on this feckless schmuck. He's sure to go into acute disequilibrium. All right, fine. If you insist. I know all too well that it's fruitless to argue with you whenever you go digging your heels in like this. Oh, please, give me a break, why don't you? I'm only trying to apply the jaws of life to rescue this low-rent, poverty-row stink burger, worthy of Stinky Joe's barbecue truck. They even stooped to substituting a dusty corner of that frequently featured Bronson Canyon Cave for a bat-infested subterranean cavern, allegedly somewhere on the far distant African continent. Listen here now, you ornately mustached Gene Shalit wannabe. Did you ever hear of a little thing called suspension of disbelief? Really, considering your chosen profession, you ought to give it a try sometime. Trust me, I'm very well acquainted with that particular state of mind. I constantly fall back on it every time I'm forced to look at myself, seated in front of this profoundly lame-o cemetery backdrop. Hey, careful now. Just for once, try not to be such an insufferable snob. Years ago, I was lucky enough to have visited Bronson Canyon. It was back in 1975. The outing was actually something of a high-spirited pilgrimage. Wow, to think that I actually got to walk through the iconic Bat Cave from the 1966 series, or at least that place which represented its exterior setting. The fact that the location was so often used as an option for movies and television doesn't at all lessen its pop cultural significance, not in my mind. Holy geekgasm, Batman! And since you bring up the topic, everyone who's genuinely in the know understands that the biggest reason to have ever watched that sock-it-to-me era Detective Comics tableau was to see the virtuoso portrayals of the villains, rather than those two kooky-caped crime fighters.
Oh, Batman, the great Batman.
What I could have done with a guest starring role as villain of the week. Were there ever to be a revival, I could finally leave all of this Ghoul Beach buffoonery far behind me, assail the dizzying heights of Hollywood greatness, and one day I might even escape the 20th Century Fox television division to star as a proper silver screen blockbuster baddie, courtesy of Fox Spotlight Pictures. It's not like he's ever shrunken from the spotlight. Oh yeah, that's right, Timmy boy. I'm totally in your corner on that account. You are? Really? Oh, sure. I'm convinced that you would be a shoo-in to replace Vincent Price in the role of Egghead. Hear, hear. Tut-tut now. Let he who is without conspicuous male pattern hair loss cast the first stone. Oh? So then, we'll be casting stones, huh? I see. Well, I'll definitely need to brush up on rereading Shirley Jackson's The Lottery. Plus, I'll need to get my pitching arm into better shape. You ought to look right at home while dodging a furious hail of projectiles. However, before we do any of that, what do you think of how our film has cultivated such a shadow-steeped atmosphere up until this point? Surely you jest. I've seen darker shadows on an old soap opera, which I used to run home from school to watch. Although I will say, regarding Professor Kristan, for a man who must write all of his books by candlelight, whilst occupying such an everlasting land of dusk, he certainly has become quite a warming ray of sunshine to those who dwell in this backwards little hamlet. They even ask him when to kiss their wives. When they find themselves in times of trouble, Mother Molly comes to them, speaking words of wisdom. The professor lives for the poor, my dear. Otherwise, yeah, these townspeople do strike me as being the simplest of farmers. People of the land. The common clay of the old world. You know, morons. In the immortal words of Una O'Connor, may they all be murdered in their beds. All except Little Red Riding Hood, at least for the time being. However, doom is not a thing to dilly-dally for long. If memory serves, our radiant little flower girl has rather a pressing appointment still to be kept with the big bad wolf. Well said, Slash, and thanks for helping to put our mutual foe in his place. Beyond that, I ought to caution you, Tim, not to fall into the trap so early in the show of becoming too pessimistic with respect to our leading lady's chances of survival, regardless of the genre archetype she's threatened by. My stars and garters! Heaven forbid I should ever run afoul of the Lycanthrope Defamation League. Otherwise, my oh-so-prickly Mr. Underling, I thought I painted quite a pleasantly lurid scenario with my earlier comments. I was under the impression that it really yanks your chain whenever I work dark and gloomy. You must think that I adorn my darkling's boudoir with ornate Nightmare Before Christmas wallpaper, a Jack Skellington lampshade on the light by my bedside, while I blithely shuffle around in a pair of plush zero doggy slippers. Don't try to deny it. I've seen that life-size Sally pin-up poster tacked up on the ceiling, directly above your bed. And with that, let's make all haste in getting back to our movie, shall we? Didn't I just light a fire beneath his spotty old rump? By all means, let us rejoin this frighteningly flatulent flicker.